Hi everyone, welcome to this big talk powered by The Big Well. I'm Louis Tellier, reporter at The Big Well. As I always say in this little intro, our primary mission as a media is to bridge this gap between the crypto space and the traditional world and building trust in still, or too often I would say, trusted words. And each week we offer to our subscribers a report on a particular theme of the ecosystem. And this week, that's going to be DeFi and the evolution of DeFi. And to talk about this, I'm very, very pleased to host one of the OG of the DeFi, Stani Kulechov. How are you, Stani? You are very famous because you are the founder of ETHLend and now called Aave. How are you, Stani?
I'm really good. Thanks for the introduction as well.
So by the way, my first question really simple, and to talk about your background, Stani. Did you ever imagine that DeFi would grow so fast and that institutional investor like I would say BlackRock will enter to this space as quickly? Just 4 years, I would say, after the DeFi summer, the real start of DeFi. So can you describe for us, for our audience, this journey, your journey and the journey of the DeFi?
I think it feels that it comes quite soon, but the way we've always thought about it is that DeFi and what we built with Aave is a infrastructure that's going to be used by everyone, regardless of what kind of an institution, what kind of size, any end user, essentially any part of the world. And that being said, we always thought about that the institutional use case is quite strong, because as DeFi as actually way of doing finance is much more better. It's more transparent. It's more auditable. It gives
It's
guarantees
faster.
It gives guarantees, and it gives guarantees of, for example, you being able to keep your possession of your assets without having centralized custodians. Like, there's just so many amazing benefits, and the bigger DeFi becomes and more liquidity we see in DeFi, that those types of network effects just compound over time. So the institutional use case was always there, but of course, early days of Aave and even early days of ETHLend, we talked to a lot of institutions, but it was really complicated to explain everything around like what DeFi is and whatnot. And today we are in a more of a reality where a lot of these institutions have digital asset teams that understand crypto, they understand blockchain, they understand DeFi, they understand really well what Aave is doing, and even monitoring actively the data, and are very excited about what the future holds. So in some ways, it feels kind of like unreal, but we're super happy that it's happening now, because it's still a long way to go where we see more adoption. And I mean, when I started the whole idea, I was still in university. I was still studying. I was basically coming with an idea and trying it out, building something on Ethereum that could be really empowering in the long term. So I'm quite happy where we are at the moment.
Yeah. So can you just describe for us, because our audience, most of our audience, or not the most, but I would say half, is from a traditional institution, a financial traditional institution in the big world. So can you just describe how this idea come of the ETHLend, Aave? And we're going to talk later about this because we are talking about Aave, but there is a big entity called Avara. So we're going to talk about this. So can you describe how this idea come, at this time, because it was almost 7 years ago right now?
Yeah, it feels
nostalgic.
It feels very nostalgic. I love nostalgia. So yeah, going back in time, the the idea was to create a borderless, open, transparent, and like a really like a well-functional credit market that is accessible by anyone. So I was building before financial applications before knowing more about, let's say, Ethereum. And one of the kind of like challenges I always saw is that they're very regional, and there isn't like really like that much of like a borderless accessible finance as an infrastructure. There is some amount, there is some progress on payments, um,
Yes.
but it's still not in the scale it and possibility it should be. But credit, especially, and being able to participate in any kind of like financial opportunity, that it didn't exist. So my kind of idea was that what if we could actually do this on chain, on the blockchain, and extend credit first and foremost against assets that has value, like cryptographic value, and then down the line, the long-term vision is that I would say that all the value eventually will be on chain. So all the value that we might have in real life of properties, any types of funds, any kind of value that has liquidity could actually be on chain, and credit could be extended on top of that. And I even was thinking that down the line we will see localized credit markets where credit is issued as it is today, but then it's just tokenized, and that and the result of that tokenization will essentially be a collateral that can be used in Aave to borrow against. So seeing back in 2017, there wasn't really a movement called DeFi. There was maybe one decentralized exchange. There wasn't any stablecoins on Ethereum. So it was really early days there. But essentially, the goal was to create an infrastructure that all of this can be built upon, and that was the kind of vision.
Okay, you're talking about stablecoins. That's perfect because it was one of my question. Since the last bull run, Aave launched its stablecoin, the Go, a decentralized stablecoin. Um, what it was important to launch a stablecoin and to propose it to the community of Aave?
One of the kind of like the way we actually build at Aave Labs and in more widely at Avara, the kind of like the um, whole idea is essentially to think about how do we just build better products, and how we can actually how we can actually make the users to get some sort of a benefit that is better ongoing basis. And with Go, we essentially saw an opportunity with stablecoins, because a lot of the Aave users, stablecoins that they were borrowing were having a variable rate, meaning
Mm,
that rate fluctuates and it's hard to predict what's your, let's say, interest rates 3 months from now, or like even like as short as 4 weeks from now. um, and that creates a challenge and an opportunity. And the opportunity is essentially having a more native stablecoin that is also more decentralized than the other
mm,
stablecoins out there, and being able to borrow and mint it against the collaterals that the users are supplying, and having that type of predictability for the interest rates by allowing the Aave DAO to set the rate. So this is super important because this actually solves one of the fundamental um, challenges and brings that rate predictability. So there's actually a demand within the Aave community to borrow Go, and that was one of the aspects. And then from the Aave DAO or the Aave protocol aspect, the another reason for there is that brings more just revenue into the Aave DAO. So
mm,
the way the Aave protocol works is that the protocol takes a reserve factor of every asset that is supplied into the protocol and borrowed out. Um, and let's say if USDC reserve factor is 10%, that means that 10% of that revenue that is earned, or let's say yield that is earned, goes to the Aave DAO. So in case of Go, all the borrowing cost is going directly to the DAO. So when you have 100 million worth of Go minted, it earns as much as having 1 billion USDC, as an example, in the Aave protocol to the Aave DAO. So there is just like a really interesting opportunities for the user, for the Aave DAO, and from more like a vision perspective is that we've solved, I would say, like liquidity, lending, borrowing, like swapping, stability on chain. We have like really good DeFi primitive and infrastructure. But what we haven't really solved is actually getting more adoption on the payment side. How we can make stablecoins everyday payment, and that's kind of like what we want to solve also on the vision perspective.
Interesting. Of course, after this question, we're going to talk about Etherfi and the Ethercash. Really interesting setup, I will say. But first, as I said, we have a very institutional audience. So can you just, for you, Stani, summarize why stablecoin? Because that's a time for stablecoin. Everybody is talking about stablecoins. You know, there is Mika, for example, in Europe. The first part of Mika goes effective since the 1st of July. So that's going to be a huge milestone for the regulation. And banks are starting to enter in this game too. So that's quite interesting. But can you just summarize for us why stablecoins are a key for the adoption of the DeFi and overall of the public blockchain?
Most importantly, stablecoins, they give sense of stability of value. So just going back in time, before stablecoins, the way you actually hold value is by holding native assets that don't have that stability or centralization aspect, and that's not necessarily great if you want to just hold certain type of value that doesn't fluctuate. So stablecoin solve that problem on the blockchain. Now, then we kind of see different types of stablecoins, which is really fascinating because stablecoins can just represent dollarized value of anything. So stablecoin can actually be created for payments, but at the same time, it can be representation of a share in a fund. It can be anything that just has that backing and the underlying is liquid enough and low risk enough. And I think now for the mainstream users, that's the easiest way to actually get into on-chain by just converting traditional dollars into stable coins. So that's why it's quite interesting. It's a way to understand and interact with the blockchain and also earn and have new earning opportunities.
Yeah, interesting. So it's a question of composability, for example. One of the end game, I will say, it's like to have a money market fund part of this fund to receive a yield and to be able to pay with it. So that's one of the key of the composability. You know, and is it one of the goal with the Go in the long term to be used as a payment, or it's too early to think about this regarding the regulation and regarding the adoption and the stability of the Go, or not? You are thinking about this right now?
From aspirational perspective, we are thinking of payments. Near-term perspective is more of ensuring that Go has proven its stability, has proven its liquidity, and its use cases, the primary use cases. So I would say that down the line, and also there's the component of blockchain scalability. So rollups are bringing that lower transaction cost, and even technologies like Validium is going to even be a fractional of what we see as transaction costs on rollup. So I think that is the future. And I think one kind of like a big thing we have to solve as a community is privacy, because privacy is needed
Yes.
for everyday payments, essentially. But payment industry is beyond like just people paying for goods. It's a lot about merchants settling transactions between each other, moving balances, and that's a huge opportunity even without going to the end user payments. But yeah, that's what we have to solve: privacy, and then you basically have a perfect infrastructure for any type of financial transactioning.
Yeah. So let's keep on this subject, because you announced just a specialist market for the Etherfi Cash. So that's the credit card just launched by Etherfi, one of the biggest protocol in DeFi right now, specialized on staking and restaking for right now on Ethereum, and soon with Bitcoin. That's coming too in DeFi. You know, can you just say to us, Stani, why it's a huge milestone for DeFi and for the adoption of the space? Because right now, to my perception, you will be able to pay, anywhere in the world where the visa is is accepted, without a bank, for example, or entirely on chain, almost entirely on chain. So that's my perspective. So why it's a huge milestone to your perspective for the adoption of the space and about payment on chain?
I mean, essentially, it's bringing more things that we actually earn on chain and use on chain, and being able to spend that in real life. I mean, that's been always the bottleneck since I've joined
Mm.
crypto. So over the
This
years,
is
I've
just speculation. Most of the time, we are hear that about the space, but right now there is a use case for everyday life, I would say.
I mean, people use Aave for everyday life. So I hear constantly stories and use cases where they're using Aave to borrow stable coins and pay for mortgage, pay for tuition, pay for everyday expenses. So that's kind of happening that extent. And then I think what's interesting about the Etherfi card is that you can actually go and spend stuff and use that crypto in more direct way. And it's been always a bottleneck. So I haven't seen it done properly up to this point. So I'm very excited about, especially using something like Aave Market, where every time you spend, it doesn't actually um, you are not selling crypto, but you're borrowing against, essentially, and that creates an interesting card opportunity, because you still retain your crypto assets. You're just borrowing the liquidity that you need to spend every day, and then you can later decide when you want to swap your assets and what amount. So you have more flexibility there. So I think that's really really cool, and also it means then with a card you can actually then use it anywhere around the world. So that's really cool.
Mm. Um, we talk about the institutionalization of the DeFi. I remember when I was at HCC in Brussels, so it was this summer. You mentioned that it's time to attract the liquidity of the TradFi right now, because it's one of the biggest challenge for DeFi and for the adoption of the DeFi. So, what does DeFi like to achieve this? I remember you were on stage with Sergey Nazarov from Chainlink and Moshek from Aptos. So, what are you cooking together, guys? First of all, and what kind of setup we can imagine to attract this liquidity of the TradFi? What kind of lake we still have as a DeFi user, as a DeFi community to attract this liquidity?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, obviously the way we think about liquidity and expansion from the Aave perspective is that where there's users and liquidity, Aave should be, it's a fundamental infrastructure that could exist anywhere, as long as there's that type of opportunity. And we basically have run out of EVMs suitable EVMs where we can deploy at the moment. So Aave is everywhere. It's a really significant piece of infrastructure that just should be anywhere where there's that user base and needs a financial layer on chain. That being said, we've been always curious about non-EVM world as well, and been looking into that. And Aptos is a really interesting ecosystem because it has a technical stack that is specifically tailored towards performance and specifically has features that are beneficial for decentralized finance from security perspective and from other types of features. And it's as simple as that we've rewrote the whole Aave protocol in Move, which is the native language of Aptos. It's a little bit similar to Rust, and the idea with that essentially is that we are deploying there a Aave market, and that will be the first non-EVM market to exist. So that's the really exciting part there. And obviously, Chainlink is supporting with the price feeds, and Chainlink has been always really big supporter of the price feeds of the Aave protocol. So that's the kind of aspect there. And institutional liquidity, I think there are different types of institutions. There are institutions that are more of like crypto hedge funds that are participating, that are active participating in markets. Then there are institutions that really want to contribute. They want to already take part of the yield opportunity. There might be fintech companies that have millions of users and they want to plug into Aave. There might be, as an example, a financial institution that wants to tokenize their own assets and get them on chain, and then being able to be used as a collateral in Aave and for borrowing. So I think the attracting of the liquidity compounds quite well with Aave because it's the biggest lending protocol, and it's basically the place to actually get your assets into. Like that's the arena for liquidity. So those are the kind of like aspects. And I think from institutional side, there is interesting experimentation happening already. We're working, for example, to build a BUIDL GSM, and BUIDL is essentially a tokenized fund of BlackRock that is on chain on Ethereum. And this allows swapping between Go and USDC, where USDC invested into BUIDL. So these kind of opportunities will get us closer to institutional liquidity, and I think the tokenization will play a really big part of that too.
Okay, interesting. So, are you not? I wouldn't say afraid by the regulation, but in Europe there is MiCA, as I mentioned. Soon there's going to be MiCA 2. So I don't know when, but the authority are working on this. So are you in talk with some regulators? I wouldn't say with Aave or Avara, to just be sure to be in the game, and that to have a regulation, proposed to develop DeFi, I would say, and not to be against DeFi. So my question is like simple. Are you not afraid by the regulation, and where we are about this, and what kind of, I would say, power we have as a community to be sure that the regulation not going to kill the ecosystem and the development of the DeFi?
Yeah, there's nothing to be afraid of regulation. Right type of regulation can be embraced, actually. And for DeFi, the right regulation for DeFi is something that takes into account the nature of decentralized systems, the nature of decentralized organizations and decentralized permissionless protocols. That's the kind of like a main thing. And I think the regulatory approach to crypto in Europe has been somewhat interesting, because there's more clear rules actually how to start, for example, centralized crypto businesses, from exchanges to stablecoin issuance to other types of activities. So down the line, I think DeFi is quite carved out at the moment, and it really needs time to actually to mature, and a lot of thinking has to go to think about where DeFi should actually be. And somehow I kind of believe in this approach of that DeFi is pretty much kind of like the ocean of liquidity, and then the ports of the seas are the ones where you can apply some of that regulation. So you will see like centralized exchanges or financial applications that might be centralized but are plugging into DeFi. That's where the regulation might happen, where there's actual custodying of assets and
Yes.
making decisions behalf of those users.
Okay. After all of these years, Aave remain on the top as a lending and borrowing protocol. But the competition is growing, so that's not bad for everyone, I would say. So there is Euler and Morpho, for example. They are trying to bring another system, and they are saying that it's more allies, in phase, I would say, with traditional needs, especially regarding the regulation. So according to that, what Aave should do to remain on the top, as a lending borrowing protocol in the long term, from your perspective?
I mean, Aave has grown since the beginning of the year, almost 10 billion in net deposits. Anyway, it's the only protocol that is actually growing at this point, especially when you put all these protocols side by side. And the reason for that is because the mindset at Aave is simply building the best product for the users. That's the kind of like a mindset there. And the user can be end user, that can be institutional, that can be any type of profile. But what basically combines all of them, they want certain type of similar things. They want simplicity, they want features, they might want things that are and then they also want reliable software. So Aave V3 has been running over years. It's based on the proven V2 version, which is based on the proven V1. It's a piece of infrastructure that is essentially known as to be the most functional, and it's the best and the biggest brand in the DeFi space, and it keeps growing. And I think overall, from the institution perspective, institutions want to work with brands and teams that are really experienced. And I really think that's a great idea, because being able to partner with someone like Aave, with the Aave DAO, you get that experience, and you can bring a lot of bigger institutions into the arena. But that also means that the more Aave grows, that will also mean that all the other DeFi protocols will help them as well down the line. But now I think that Aave is kind of like the chosen one to have of these bigger initiatives, and it makes sense. We've been building for the past 7 years. We've been growing the past 7 years, and we're gonna keep doing that. And I think the bigger vision here is really not the actual competition, is that how we get all these users on chain, and how we can empower them with Aave. And that's our vision. So we care more about what we can actually do to onboard more users and get more credit on chain, and unlock more liquidity. So we're very vision driven, and that's probably also one of the reasons why we're doing it so passionately.
Okay. And you know, Stani, there is a huge debate ongoing around Ethereum. It's about the fragmentation of the liquidity, especially between L2s, for example. So there is another debate around the value of the ETH, but for me, that's another another subject to talk. So, what do you consider to be the best solution for combating the fragmentation of the liquidity right now?
One important thing to acknowledge is that um, rollups are essentially a good way to scale the transactioning of Ethereum. So fundamentally, you can transact with a lower cost basis, and then at the same time, you can inherit the security from Ethereum. So that's really fundamentally important because it opens up um, new use cases and lowers the cost. The interesting part is that the kind of future for Ethereum is roll up. So you might see like dozens and dozens, or even like thousands of roll ups built on Ethereum, and obviously down the line, all of them have to essentially buy ETH and use that ETH um, to store the transaction on Ethereum. So if you need that type of a security, which uh, financial infrastructure will need. So the thing is that you can put everything else except DeFi into a data availability layer. That might work, like a separate data availability layer, except like Ethereum, where you need that significant security. So Ethereum will have its use case, and it's one of the strongest use cases and value propositions um, in the whole blockchain space. That's my thesis there. And what you mentioned about the liquidity, I think that's a really interesting point, because down the line, what we see is that whenever there's a new network, there is such a high demand for Aave and getting Aave into those new
Yes.
deployments.
Mm.
Um, I even see networks starting with a completely different use case, and then they are pivoting to DeFi, and then Aave is the first thing that they really want. And here, what's interesting is that we probably going to see some fragmentation of liquidity, but that's the bigger problem is not where the liquidity is stored or located, is how do we pass messages so that the balances of these different um, liquidity pools in different networks could move faster. And this is something we're thinking with the Aave v4, and down the line with a cross-chain liquidity layer, to move liquidity faster across different deployments, different Aave deployments across different networks. So essentially, I personally think that by the time that this problem needs to be solved, the way most likely to solve it is with um, zero knowledge proofs, where you can verify these transactions between different networks and then in bulk move the liquidity. So essentially, that enables also cross-chain lending. So you might
Mm.
be storing your collateral on Ethereum, but you're borrowing Go on another
L2.
altitude
Mm.
time. Yeah.
And I'm curious about this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Aptos will be the first non-EVM deployment for Aave, if I'm correct, or the major one. Um, you know what challenges does this represent? You know, to be deployed on another non-EVM blockchain, because that's a huge problem we still have. There is good networks to deploy, but most of the time it's not really that's not really match technology. So we have to improve it. That's a big challenge. So how it's going with between Aptos and Aave to deploy it, for example.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's something that you need to build on from scratch, a
Yes.
whole protocol. But there's a lot of good inspiration already on our previous work. The know-how and the knowledge doesn't change much, so that business logic is intact, almost the same. And definitely, like Aptos or EVM, let's say Move or like EVM in Solidity, they all have their own constraints. And limitations, but also interesting opportunities as well. So it just requires kind of to think from the perspective of how do you build the best protocol on Aptos in Move, and go from there. The existing Aave deployment reference works in favor, because that's the main business logic. But then there's certain things, for example, that works differently with Move on an Aptos, and requires a deviation from maybe like a EVM implementation. But it's a fascinating challenge, and a fascinating piece of work. And I do think that I'm a firm believer in EVM, and I personally think that EVM can actually innovate much more faster by seeing more different implementations of EVM on L2s. They don't need to be exact the same as they are like
Mm.
get everywhere. They can actually have variations, and you can move faster on L2s. And something that I really love about the Aptos ecosystem is that um, the actual updates of the network and the virtual machine are relatively frequent, because their audience is essentially high performance, high frequency financial use cases. But it's a fascinating project, and if we are able to do it properly, what it also means is that this is a way for the Aave community to expand into new markets, and be also technologically agnostic when it comes to expansion.
Mm. Stani, for this first chapter of the interview, I have I like to ask this question because once again there is so many traditional institutional watching this podcast and hearing this podcast. So in 1 or 2 minutes, I would say, how you will be able, if you have a big bank or a big asset manager in front of you, how you will be able to pitch DeFi and also, I guess, Aave for the best understanding and for the best business for you.
I would just start simply by saying essentially that DeFi and Aave is better, faster, stronger finance that will create more opportunities, will create more revenue, create more volumes, um, and also creates more secure way of interacting with financial transactions and financial opportunities. And end to end risk can be calculated more precisely, means that if you have better precision, that lowers the cost of the risk as well, and purifies the revenue. Essentially, it's a world of new opportunities, and those who are early enough there will get the most benefit of it. So
Mm.
essentially, a financial institution that is early enough will be able to get the highest market share, and that's essentially what BlackRock is doing now.
Okay, are you? I have to ask this question. Are you still in talk directly with BlackRock, and what kind of talking you have with this player like this?
I mean, we talk to many financial institutions, so it's a BlackRock is not the only one. We talked with many, and I think that's a trend will continue. There's going to be more and more financial institutions that are interested in one way or another way participating in DeFi or RWAs and tokenization.
I see. I see. I see. Let's talk about SociaFi, Stani, because it another huge, I would say, goal for the Avara ecosystem with Lens. But first, it was on Thursday. If I'm correct, or it was on Wednesday anyway. We saw that the team of Friend.Tech, runners of the control of the smart contract, following apparently, to my perspective, a stagnant growth from Friend.Tech. Sorry. So, what's your view on this, and what do you think? On Friend.Tech's hand, apparently, we will see in the long term, because for me it is likely. It shows that it's difficult to launch a decentralized social network if you take a look of the Friend.Tech story, because it was very interesting proposition value, but at the end apparently it stopped. So what's your view, your view on this?
Yeah, I kind of I never really got into that product that much. But what's interesting is that they were able to create a lot of traction really quickly by putting financial elements into some of these like social features, and to some extent it worked to a certain audience. But it had like really it was like, let's say like if you can focus into like financial features and making the features fully about, or the application fully about finance or like financial opportunities, this was definitely on the spectrum of like putting the financialization as the whole idea. um, and I think those kind of things are really tricky because you have ups and downs, and when you have ups, everyone excited, and when it's going down, people are
Yes.
like um, fleeing. So I think in overall, like building something really good and resilient and something that is really empowering, it takes time essentially. Um, and I more like the way I think about social networks, or let's say like decentralized social networks. I actually call like the mindset I have is a resilient social network. So what I want to build is something where um, we have a infrastructure that gives people voice, and that voice can't be taken away from these users. And then based on that idea, we can build applications on top of this infrastructure and integrate the system anywhere where voice is needed, publications is needed, or there's like attention economy and distribution. That's the kind of like um, model I'm more leaning towards, because in the current state we build internet in a way that it's really owned by few bigger tech companies, and some of them are social media companies, and they own all the user data. So users don't really
Yes.
have any option to just stick around, and if they leave, they lose everything. Everything is left behind. Their whole social capital, connections, contents. They would just have to start over, and that's not fair. And also, users not getting paid for monetization.
Yes.
Um, that's another big problem. So it's a really big problem, a really hard problem to solve, and it takes time. But I think it's worth to solve.
Okay, with Lens, we're going to describe it. There is another big thing to talk about this. Given what's happening with Telegram, for example, how do you plan to manage moderation? Because that's a huge concern all the time put on the table, especially from government, for example. So regulation don't seems to be able to protect developer of permissionless project too. So how do you plan to manage the moderation and to put a plan about this, especially regarding the development of the Lens protocol?
Yeah, I mean Telegram is it's not permissionless. It's a business, and a business has its obligations and liabilities. And that's why it's actually better for developers, or better for Telegram to be a protocol. That means that there is this fundamental tissue where everyone has a voice and access and ability to connect. But then it's all these applications and application layer that is built on top that is then governing of the actual reach of those messages and connectivity. And that's where actually moderation can happen. And not just it enables not just moderation by these applications, but it creates ability to even compete on moderating content better and being more fair. um, and I think that's a really um, exciting angle for me. So build a system that is accessible, give everyone voice, and let the applications to actually create moderation systems and tools that can compete on being the most fair system in the world.
And in terms of application, because you talk about this, what is the ethos of Lens? In general, what kind of application you want to attract, and people are able to, I would say, to build on top of Lens or with Lens protocol and around Lens protocol.
Yeah, with Lens, the new version of Lens v3, you can actually build or like integrate Lens into anything. It can be integrated into a blog, just a simple blog on the internet, into a news site, into a you can build a social app. So there's a lot of flexibility that you can actually build. I personally want to see more uh, being built in more like a new novel use cases than anything else. I think the existing social media landscape from the application perspective is it's very saturated, but also nothing exciting has happened for years
Mm.
on the social side. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially when you're starting to think outside of the box.
And is it, I would say, realistic um, to want to convert a user of traditional social network to social file right now? Is it mainly reserved right now for crypto users? Because when you are a builder, okay, you are able to see the difference when you want to build. For example, with Lens or with Forecaster, for example, you have many more options to build. But for end user, that's could be the same front end, So how you want to attract new user right now in a social file?
So I think that the way we're going to build on chain, especially social and consumer, is that the users won't really know that they're using the blockchain, and
Mm.
that's how it's going to be essentially. Um, so the applications that you will see on Lens v3 might as well be, you can onboard with email, you can onboard with phone number. You don't really feel the blockchain. That's all abstracted away. So you can build to any type of an audience. Obviously, the people who are in crypto, they probably will discover these applications faster. Um, but I do think that there's a really good chance, an opportunity to actually build towards a full mainstream user base.
But what will be your pitch, for example, if you have, I don't know, your parents or your family in front of you? No, it's not a good example, but another friend, or you will be able to pitch a Lens, to go on Lens and to, for example, um, be more or less on Twitter or X, for example, and to go on Lens.
Well, Lens is simply a protocol. So it's kind of the same as going to HTTPS,
Mm.
and that's just a protocol. So Lens is a set of tools that you can build social applications or integrate social features into your existing application, whether it's Web2 or Web3. Um, for the actual end applications that we want to see, that really depends what's going to get built. What I want to see actually is applications that are really novel, new ways of interacting with content, um, new ways of connecting with new people, um, or making existing applications more more social, and
Mm.
even financial applications could be more social, and using social proof as a better way of discovering new financial opportunities. I think that's also interesting.
The vast majority of the Lens revenue come from right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but from registration, sorry, fees, with collect accounts for a teeny proportion of revenue right now. So what's your long-term business model? Is it sustainable in the long term to stay with that, or you must in the future add more source of revenue?
I think the profile mints are interesting revenue at the moment, but I think there is bigger opportunity on actual distribution. So as the networks grow and there's more attention on the network overall, being able to monetize your distribution to your audience, I think that's going to be the main kind of like direction. And as a protocol, there's going to be multiple ways to monetize down the line. So we're not locked into one specific model, but open to many different models.
And what's your, can you provide us summarize the roadmap for the following months and the following years? I know you released a lot of this during the last HCC regarding Lens. So can you just for the audience provide a summarize of your roadmap about Lens to have an overview of this?
Yeah, for the next months, we're focusing on delivering a Validium, which is the Lens network, and that's going to be the infrastructure for all Lens transactions. So that means that Lens transaction costs will be extremely affordable, much more affordable than rollups, for example. Actually, so affordable that developers, they don't want to pass this cost to the users. So that's the one thing, the infrastructure, and then Lens version 3 is essentially building the Lens protocol in a way that the application developers can choose any of these primitives from the social graphs, from usernames, anything that they actually need in their application and inherit them. So that's going to be the next few months, the roadmap. And obviously down the line, over the years, we want to build more scale, more resiliency, and lay down a more longer term roadmap.
So, by the way, before my two last question, what do you expect from the ZKSync and the Elastic chain? Because there is a huge links share between ZKSync and the Lens protocol right now.
It's actually very interesting because it's going to be a set of networks can actually talk to each other. So you can transact with one network and another network without actually moving your assets, just with these different ZK proofs. So I think the vision is really exciting there. Lens is going to be the network with social features, and it's going to focus a lot of consumer and social use cases. But you also will see some interesting financial use cases and applications there as well. I think ZK is a stack. It's really future proof. So I'm super excited about that, especially because I think ZK is the way to scale Ethereum. So I think from that perspective, it's going to be quite future proof vision.
Okay, interesting. My two last questions, Stani. I like to ask this question because most of the time when you want to build a super app, a kind of super app, you need financial tools, for people, banking tools. You have this with Aave, you have a stablecoin with the Go. More than that, you have to provide, I would say, entertainment and social network. So with Avara, with all of the structure of Avara and of the community of Avara. So, for example, with Lens or Aave, you have all of this. So, is it in your mind to build, I would say, like a decentralized super app? I don't know if we are able to call it in mind. And is it your goal at the end to provide, for users in the same place, or I would say in the same ecosystem, something like a super app?
I mean, at this point, we're still focusing on a lot of the infrastructure side of the development. But the really cool thing about on chain is that you can plug any contracts to any application. So down the line, I would expect that type of an application exists where you can get everything from finance to social experiences to commerce. So I could imagine that can happen one day.
But that's not your end game. I realize the question because that's really interesting from the industry point of view.
Well, I think it's we don't really have an end game. I think end game is quite weird approach because I think once you are starting to plan an end game, you are basically locking yourself into something. So the way we think is more of like, what's the next important thing to solve
users.
or build or iterate, and that's more kind of like an approach we usually take.
For you, can you provide for us an horizon, I would say, of the mass adoption of the public blockchain in the future? It's for in 5, 10, 20 years. I don't know.
Predictions.
Yes, a prediction. Sorry.
Mass adoption, I'd say 5 to 6 years.
5 to 6 years. Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's speedy. That's quick.
Yeah.
I would say. Why so quick?
I think everything is coming together. There's better tooling now to build for consumers and mainstream. So we're getting closer to that.
Okay. And yeah, my last question. You are working on the Aave blockchain. I will say where we are about this, because I'm asking the question about the super app because there is an end game from Maker, elaborated by Ron Christensen, and the idea is to have a more ecosystem in the center with a stablecoin. So that's a DAI, and in the future that's going to be the USDS, and maybe why not the pure DAI in the future. So is it important to have an interoperable ecosystem, and is it the way followed by most of the, I would say, the smart guy of the ecosystem, the more logic way to go to be a more sustainable ecosystem and product?
I think so for Aave, especially because Aave as a brand is quite big, and in terms of like the total TVL of the Aave ecosystem is bigger than many of the L2s. I guess it's even like if it will be L2, it will be the biggest. So from that perspective, yes, yeah, and also I think there's have to be better capabilities to move liquidity across networks, and that's something we are going to focus as well. And Aave Network is also part of that vision as well. I do think that creates interesting opportunities to actually just create a better environment interacting with Aave, and also governing that type of infrastructure. So I think it's going to be valuable.
Okay. Thank you, Stani, for your time. Almost 1 hour together. I remind the audience that we're gonna provide for our subscribers a big focus on DeFi and the history of DeFi. So it was the subject of the topic. We talk about Stani. You can also right now read a very big analysis of the SociaFi. So we provide an analysis of Farcaster, but maybe soon on Lens with the usual roadmap you just described for us, Stani. So once again, thank you, Stani, for your time, and good luck for all of your roadmap. And yeah, I wish you a success for the future about Avara community and ecosystem. So thank you once again, Stani, for your time.
Thank you so much.